The whole room went quiet the moment I walked in. Not the polite kind of quiet, the kind where people stop mid-sentence and turn their heads slowly, like they already know something is about to happen, and they don't want to miss it. My aunt's casket was at the far end of the room, surrounded by white lilies. My cousin was crying in the front row. And there, 3 rows back, sitting together like nothing had ever happened, my mother, my older sister, and my brother. All 3 of them in black. All 3 of them looking straight at me. I didn't flinch. I found a seat on the opposite side of the room, sat down, and folded my hands in my lap. 7 years. That's how long it had been since I last saw their faces, and I had absolutely nothing to say to them. Let me back up. My name is Vivian Ashby. Well, that's the name on my driver's license now. On my lease. On my business cards. On the plaque outside the office door I earned after 6 years of working my way up from the bottom of a marketing firm in Portland. I wasn't always Vivian Ashby. I grew up as the middle child in a family of 5 in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. My parents had 3 kids. My older sister, who I'll call by her role because she never really felt like a sister to me. She was just the oldest. My brother came last, the baby, the one my mother called her miracle. And then there was me, planted in the middle like a weed nobody asked for. I don't say that for sympathy. I say it because it's the most accurate description I have. From the time I was old enough to understand how a household worked, I was the one who understood it best. I woke up early. I made sure my homework was done. I kept my room clean without being asked. I learned to cook eggs and toast by the time I was 8, because my mother spent most mornings in bed with what she called her headaches, which I later understood was a combination of red wine the night before and a deep indifference to mornings in general. My sister got new clothes every fall. My brother got the big bedroom and every video game he ever pointed at. I wore my sister's hand-me-downs until they were so out of style that even the kids who didn't care about fashion noticed. I didn't complain. I told myself it was fine. I told myself a lot of things were fine for a very long time. What I wanted, what I always wanted, was to be seen. Not celebrated, not spoiled, just seen, acknowledged. The way you acknowledge someone who lives in the same house as you and tries hard every single day. That acknowledgement never came. There was a science fair in 6th grade. I built a working model of a water filtration system out of materials I found in the garage and researched entirely on my own. My teacher called it one of the best projects she'd seen from a 6th grader. I came home that afternoon and my mother was on the phone with her friend, walking circles around the kitchen. I stood in the doorway holding my 2nd place ribbon. 2nd place, not 1st, because the 7th grader who won had help from a father who was an actual engineer, which even the judges admitted. And my mother looked right at me, kept talking, and turned away. I set the ribbon on the counter. It was still there 2 weeks later, pushed to the back behind the fruit bowl. I won a writing contest in 8th grade. A real one, statewide, $50 prize. My English teacher called the house to congratulate my parents. My father said, "That's nice," and went back to watching football. My mother asked me if I'd finished the laundry. I had. I always had. By the time high school started, I had already learned not to share anything that mattered with my family. Good grades, awards, friendships, the small ordinary victories of a teenager trying to figure out who she was. I kept all of it to myself, pressed between the pages of journals I hid under my mattress. If I didn't tell them, they couldn't ignore it. That's the logic you develop when you grow up being invisible. You protect yourself by shrinking. But I didn't shrink in the ways that mattered. Inside, where no one could see, I was building something. I got into the University of Michigan. Full academic scholarship. My high school counselor cried when she found out. My mother asked if I was sure I wanted to go so far from home. Not congratulations. Not we're proud of you. Just, are you sure? I was sure. Moving into that dorm room in Ann Arbor was the first time in my life I felt like I could breathe properly. Like the air itself was different. I unpacked my 2 duffel bags and my secondhand desk lamp, and I sat on the edge of the mattress in that tiny cinder block room and I thought, this is mine. Nobody can take this from me. I studied communications. I was good at it in the way you're only good at things you've been quietly preparing for your whole life. I understood how to read a room. I understood subtext and silence and the 100 ways people say one thing and mean another. I'd been studying that since I was 4 years old. I made real friends for the first time. I had a roommate named Bex, short for Bexley. She hated it, but I always thought it suited her, who was funny and loud and unapologetically herself in a way I'd never seen up close before. She's still one of my closest friends. She was the first person who ever told me that the way my family treated me wasn't normal. She said it so matter-of-factly over dining hall pasta that I laughed first. Then I went back to my room and sat with it for a long time. I called home occasionally. My mother would give me a 10-minute update on my sister's life, my brother's baseball games, neighborhood gossip. Then she'd say she had to go. My father would pick up sometimes and ask how the weather was in Michigan. That was usually the full extent of it. My junior year, I told them I'd been accepted into a competitive summer internship in Chicago, one of only 12 students selected nationally. My mother said that sounded stressful. My father asked if I'd need money. I said no. He said okay. That was it. I stopped expecting anything after that. I graduated in May of my senior year. Dean's List, departmental honors, a job offer already in hand from a firm in Portland I'd been courting since February. My graduation ceremony was on a Saturday, a beautiful day. I had 4 tickets for family and I sent them all home. My parents, my sister, my brother. My mother confirmed they were coming. She confirmed it twice. I stood in line with my classmates in the gym beforehand in my cap and gown, looking for a text from someone saying they'd arrived. Where they were sitting, were they watching for me? Nothing. I walked across the stage, shook the dean's hand, accepted my diploma, walked back. I scanned the audience during the whole thing. I didn't see them anywhere. I waited by the fountain outside for an hour after the ceremony ended. My mother finally texted at 6:47 that evening. We ended up not making it. Your sister had something come up. We'll celebrate when you get home. I read that text 3 times. Something come up. After 2 confirmations, on the day I graduated from the University of Michigan with honors and a job offer, after 4 years of working harder than I had ever worked at anything in my life, something came up. I didn't respond. I sat on a bench near the fountain while the campus emptied out around me, still in my graduation gown because I hadn't thought to bring a change of clothes. And I watched other families take photos together, parents hugging their kids, someone's grandmother crying happy tears, a little brother running across the lawn to jump into his sister's arms. I bought myself a slice of carrot cake from a bakery on State Street that evening and ate it alone at a corner table. The woman behind the counter had asked if I was celebrating something. I said yes. She said congratulations and smiled at me like she meant it. That smile undid me more than anything else had. I cried in the bathroom afterward. The ugly kind of crying, the kind you've been saving up for years. Then I washed my face, went back to my apartment, and started thinking clearly for the first time about what I actually wanted my life to look like. I moved to Portland that July. I told my family I was leaving. My mother said Ohio would always be there if things didn't work out. My sister didn't respond to the text I sent. My brother sent back a thumbs up emoji. I threw myself into the job. The firm was called Crestline, and it was small. 12 people, scrappy, ambitious. I was the youngest person there by 4 years, and I worked like I had something to prove, which I did, though not to anyone there. I was proving it to myself. I was proving that the girl nobody came to see graduate could build something worth seeing. Within 2 years, I'd been promoted twice. I was managing my own client accounts by the time I was 25. I was good at it. Genuinely good. The kind of good that comes from loving what you do and working at it constantly. I also started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Defel Fielding, and she had a small office near the waterfront with a plant on the windowsill that was aggressively healthy in a way that felt intentional. She didn't tell me what to think about my family. She just asked questions, carefully, until I arrived at my own answers. What I arrived at, over about 18 months of weekly sessions, was this. My family had never been neglectful out of cruelty exactly. There was no dramatic abuse, no defining single incident I could point to. What there was instead was a consistent, low-level dismissal of my existence that had been so normalized, so woven into the fabric of daily life that none of them had ever stopped to examine it. They just kept going, and I'd kept absorbing it, like a sponge wrung out so many times it eventually loses the capacity to absorb anything at all. The graduation was the moment I stopped absorbing. I didn't cut off my family right away. There's a version of this story that has a clear dramatic break, a phone call, a speech. That's not how mine went. What happened was quieter and slower and in some ways harder to explain. I just stopped reaching, stopped initiating, stopped being available, stopped calling on Sundays, stopped texting on birthdays beyond a brief two-word message, stopped performing the role of daughter and middle child like it was the only role available to me. My mother called more in the first few months. She asked if I was going through something. I said I was fine. She called less after that. My sister and I had never been close, so her silence felt like more of the same. My brother texted occasionally, random things, memes, a photo of his new car. I responded lightly but briefly. I didn't close the door exactly, but briefly. I didn't close the door exactly. I just stopped propping it open. And then I changed my name. I know that's the part that surprises people. I know it sounds dramatic. But here's what I want you to understand. It wasn't about them. It wasn't an act of revenge or a statement I was making to the family. It was something I did entirely for myself. I had never liked my birth name. I'd felt disconnected from it since childhood. It was a family name, my grandmother's name, given to me for reasons that had more to do with tradition than with me. When I became an adult living independently in a city where nobody knew me, that name began to feel like a costume I hadn't chosen. It didn't fit the person I was becoming. I researched the legal process. I filed the paperwork. A judge signed off on a Tuesday morning in October, 3 years after I'd moved to Portland. I walked out of the courthouse as Vivian Ashby. Vivian because I'd always loved the sound of it. Ashby because it was my maternal grandmother's maiden name. The one woman in my family who had ever looked at me like I was worth looking at. She'd passed away when I was 11. I carried her name forward as the only piece of that family I wanted to keep. I updated my professional profiles, my accounts, my ID. At work, I simply introduced myself as Vivian when new people joined. There had been enough turnover by then that most people only knew me by the new name. I told Bex, who said, "That is so completely you and I love it." I told Dr. Fielding, who asked me how it felt. I said it felt like putting on clothes that actually fit. I didn't tell my family. Not right away. Not because I was hiding it, though I understood they'd experience it that way. I didn't tell them because I had already stopped considering them a primary audience for the things that mattered in my life. The name change was personal. It wasn't for public announcement. It wasn't a message to anyone. They found out eventually. My mother left a voicemail about 8 months later. She'd been trying to search for me online, she said, and couldn't find me. And was I okay? And why was everything under a different name? Her voice was more confused than hurt. I called her back and explained, briefly and without apology, that I had legally changed my name and was living well in Portland. She asked if I was in some kind of trouble. I said no. She said she didn't understand. I said that was okay. That was the last real conversation we had for a long time. Life in Portland continued. Good life. Genuinely good. The kind I used to imagine when I was 12 years old, lying on the floor of my bedroom, staring at the ceiling, trying to picture a future where I had some control over my own story. I had friends, real ones, people who showed up when things were hard and celebrated when things were good. I had an apartment I loved, with big windows and a coffee maker I'd splurged on, and a bookshelf that covered an entire wall. I was running a small team at Crestline by the time I was 28. I was healthy. I went to therapy. I ran sometimes. I learned to make sourdough during a particularly rainy November, failed spectacularly, and then got genuinely good at it by February. I didn't miss my family the way I thought I would. Or rather, I missed the family I'd wanted them to be, the one that existed in the version of my childhood where someone came to the science fair, where my mother looked up when I walked through the door. I grieved that family sometimes, that imagined one. The real one I just carried differently. Like something you pack for a trip and then realize you never actually needed. Then my aunt passed away. She was my mother's older sister, and she had been kind to me in the scattered way of a woman with her own full life and children and responsibilities. She'd remembered my birthday most years. She'd sent a card when I graduated college, a real card with a check inside and a note in her handwriting that said, "So proud of you. Keep going." I'd kept the card. I still have it somewhere. I went to the service. I went because she deserved someone who had genuinely liked her, and because I was still capable of separating my love for her from my feelings about the family she belonged to. I flew into Columbus on a Thursday morning and drove a rental car to the funeral home. I had not told anyone in my family I was coming, and that's how I ended up standing in the doorway of that room, and the whole room went quiet, and I found a seat on the far side for my mother and sister and brother, and I sat down and I folded my hands in my lap. The service was beautiful. Her daughter gave a eulogy that made everyone cry. There were photos on a display board near the entrance. My aunt at various ages, laughing, surrounded by people who loved her. In one of the photos, she was young, maybe 30, and she looked so alive it ached. Afterward, in the parking lot, I was almost at my rental car when I heard my mother's voice behind me. Vivian, she'd used the new name. I don't know if that was intentional or automatic. I stopped walking and turned around. She looked older. My sister was beside her, and my brother a few steps back. All three of them. My mother's expression was the one I'd known my whole life. That specific combination of exhaustion and mild irritation that had been her default setting when dealing with me, even when she was trying to be soft. "We didn't know you were coming," she said. "I know. You could have told us." "I know." My sister stepped forward. She'd always been the one who pressed. "Why didn't you? We've been trying to reach you for, I know," I said again, and something in my voice stopped her. There was a pause. A long one. The parking lot was emptying around us, other mourners moving toward their cars, voices low. My mother tried a different approach. "We just want to know you're okay. We're your family." And there it was. That word, family, deployed the way it always was, as both explanation and conclusion, as though the word itself answered every question that had come before it. I looked at her. I looked at my sister. I looked at my brother, who was examining the asphalt like it contained something interesting. And I said something I had thought about many times in Dr. Fielding's office, in my apartment, on runs along the waterfront. Words I had turned over so many times they'd worn smooth, like river stones. I said them quietly, without anger, because I had run out of anger years ago. What I had left was just clarity. I told them about the graduation. Not the first time I'd mentioned it. I'd brought it up once, briefly in that last phone call with my mother, but this time I said it fully. I told them what it had felt like to stand in that gym and scan the audience and find no one. I told them about waiting at the fountain for an hour, about the carrot cake, about the woman who said congratulations, and how that small kindness from a stranger had wrecked me in a way that nothing my family had ever done had quite managed. My mother started to say that my sister had had a real emergency that day. Something with her apartment, pipes or flooding, I don't remember. I said I know. And I also know that was the same day you confirmed, twice, that you'd all be there. I didn't say it as an accusation. I said it as a fact. A quiet, solid, immovable fact. "That wasn't the first time," I said, "and you know it wasn't." My mother looked at the ground. "I don't want to fight with you," I said. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here because I loved Aunt Carol and I wanted to say goodbye to her. That's the whole reason." My brother finally looked up. He said low, "So that's it? You're just done with us?" I thought about it. Really thought, standing there in the October air in a black dress in a funeral home parking lot. "I'm not done," I said. "I'm just not available the way I used to be. I spent a long time being available in ways that cost me things and getting nothing back. That's not a transaction I'm willing to keep making." My sister looked like she had more to say. My mother looked like she was somewhere between hurt and defensive, the way she always looked when she was the one being asked to account for something. My brother just nodded, very slightly, like maybe he understood something he wasn't ready to say out loud. I told them I hoped they were well. I meant it. I turned around and walked to my car. I drove back to the airport the next morning. I took a window seat on the flight home and watched Ohio disappear beneath the clouds, the neat squares of November farmland going gray and then white as we climbed. I've thought a lot about whether I made the right choices, about the name, the distance, the silence at the graduation that started everything. I don't spend much time on regret. Regret requires believing there was an alternate path where things turned out meaningfully different, and I'm not sure that path existed. I was who I was in a family that had no good way of seeing it. That's not a tragedy, it's just a mismatch. What I know is this: I am 31 years old. I live in an apartment with big windows in a city I chose. I have a career I built from scratch, and friends who answer the phone when I call. I have a name that feels like mine. I have a bookshelf that covers an entire wall and a sourdough starter I'd kept alive for 3 years and named Gerald, which is a terrible name for a sourdough starter, which is exactly why I like it. I have a life, a full one, chosen, piece by piece, by me. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. To anyone watching who grew up feeling like the background character in your own family's story, you are not the background. You never were. You were just in the wrong room. When you finally find the right one, you'll know. It feels like breathing properly for the first time. And before you go, I want to know where you're watching from tonight. Drop it in the comments. And if this story hit close to home, the comment section is yours. I read every single one. I'll see you in the next one. I've been asked more than once whether I regret how things ended up with my family. It's a fair question. I used to turn it over in my head at night, the way you press on a bruise just to confirm it still hurts. Here's where I've landed. The things that happen to us are rarely the whole story. What shapes us, what actually determines the direction of a life, is what we decide to do with what happened. That's not a comfortable truth because it means the responsibility sits with us, not just with the people who let us down. But it's the truest thing I know. I spent years absorbing the message that I wasn't worth showing up for. Nobody announced that message out loud. Nobody sat me down and said it directly. It arrived in 1,000 small moments. The ribbon left on the counter, the text at 6:47 in the evening, the empty seats at the fountain. And for a long time, I accepted it. I worked harder, achieved more, made myself easier to acknowledge. I thought if I just kept proving myself, eventually someone would look up. That's not how it works. I know that now. You cannot earn the attention of people who have already decided, whether consciously or not, that you don't require it. And pouring your energy into that impossible equation is the quietest, slowest way to disappear. What saved me wasn't one dramatic moment. It was a series of small, deliberate choices to redirect that energy toward people and places that gave something back. Bex, who told me the truth over dining hall pasta when I was 20 years old and didn't know I needed to hear it. Dr. Korst, Fielding, who never once told me what to think, but asked exactly the right questions until I found my own answers. The city of Portland, where nobody knew the version of me that had grown up invisible, and I could simply be whoever I was working on becoming. Vivian Ashby is not a mask I put on to hide from my family. She is what I grew into when I stopped spending myself on people who treated me like furniture. That name change, that Tuesday morning in a courthouse, was the most honest thing I had ever done for myself. It was an act of intelligence, not anger. I understood, finally, that I was allowed to design my own life rather than inherit the one my family had defaulted me into. The hardest part of ethical living, real ethical living, not the performative kind, is that it requires honesty about your own role in things. I could have stayed resentful. I could have organized my entire identity around what was done to me. Some people do. I understand why. But resentment is a full-time occupation, and I had other things to build. What I know about resilience is that it isn't toughness. It isn't pretending things didn't hurt. It's the quieter practice of deciding, every day, that what lies ahead matters more than what's already behind you. That parking lot in Columbus, my mother's face, my sister's unfinished sentence, my brother looking at the ground, that was behind me before I even reached my rental car. Not because it didn't matter, because I had already chosen, years before, to stop letting it steer. If you're somewhere in the middle of your own version of this, still waiting for someone to look up, still proving yourself to a room that isn't paying attention, I want you to hear this. The proof was never for them. It was always for you. And the moment you redirect it toward yourself, toward people who are actually watching, toward work and friendships and a life built by your own hand, that's when things start to become real. That's the only revenge worth having. A life that's genuinely, quietly, completely yours.